Bom dia, bem-vindos a essa mesa redonda, padrões e boas práticas para a integração da sustentabilidade em investimentos. Eu gostaria de agradecer aqui a Maria e a Vasco e todos que nos acompanham hoje para o que acho que vai ser realmente uma mesa redonda muito interessante. Estamos muito empolgados aqui. Primeiro, vou apresentar brevemente a pessoal que vai estar na mesa redonda em si, né? Temos a Nicolás Pfaff, da International Capital Markets Association, ICMA. Temos a Stacy Coleman, da Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, TCFD. Temos a Arturo Rodrigues, Sustainable Accounting Standards Board, SASB. Temos a Marcelo Serafim, the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment, PRI, e temos a Gláucia Terreiro, the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, aqui no Brasil. Então, isso aqui é nosso terceiro evento e último evento dessa semana da World Investor Week 2020. E tem sido uma semana muito rica. Nos dois primeiros webinars falamos de tendências internacionais e nacionais das emissões de títulos temáticos. Estamos falando também da capacidade desses títulos para canalizar recursos para uma área tão importante como a recuperação econômica do Brasil, que é a infraestrutura mesma, né, como a alavanca. E as gravações desses dois eventos, estão disponíveis no site do BID. E eu convido a todos que têm interesse neles, que visita e que vai ser aqui, o link vai ser compartilhado no chat dessa reunião aqui, que tem sido conversas muito interessantes, muito pontuais com relação aos temas que eu mencionei. Hoje, vamos abordar aspectos mais práticos dessas emissões. Princípios, padrões, boa governança e divulgações dos impactos positivos, que são temas muito relevantes. Deduzimos que a grande maioria dos que estão aqui nesse evento não tem dúvidas de que os títulos temáticos são um mecanismo estratégico e útil para promover e, ao mesmo tempo, crescimento econômico e os benefícios sociais e ambientais. Desculpa, esqueci de mencionar. Temos interpretação lá embaixo. Tem um globinho lá que, se vocês quiserem ouvir em inglês, podem colocar lá. For those that need interpretation, please note that at the bottom of the screen, there's a circle that allows you to hear switch languages, to toggle between English and Portuguese. No início do desenvolvimento desse mercado, na década 2000, era preciso ainda convencer investidores e emissores da relevância e até da pertinência desses papéis. Hoje, já é um mercado com 800 bilhões de dólares em green bonds ao redor do mundo. Sabemos que a emissão de títulos temáticos, bem como a incorporação da sustentabilidade em geral dos projetos, torna esses projetos mais resilientes a mudanças climáticas e outros impactos ambientais, mas também gera benefícios reputacionais para o emissor e para o investidor, além do que estimula a adesão de boas práticas de governança e transparência. Então, eu acho que ninguém tem que ser convencido mais dessas coisas. É por isso, são atrativos e úteis para ajudar a superar as lacunas de investimento no Brasil. Nos enorgulhamos de fazer parte dessa história, já que estamos presentes em ao menos 20% das emissões dos papéis temáticos na América Latina e o Caribe. No Brasil, temos diversas ações para impulsionar as finanças sustentáveis, incluindo promoção de diálogo público-privado do setor financeiro com o desenvolvimento do mercado local por meio do Laboratório de Inovação Financeira, o LAB. Apoio a vários emissores na estruturação de seus títulos temáticos. Posso mencionar aqui o Banco ABC, que foi uma emissão comprada pelo BID, também o BDMG com o Framework e outros que estão em processo de aperfeiçoamento para serem entregues ao mercado. Mas ainda há dúvidas sobre como fazê-lo, né? Essa parte prática. ou como assegurar que os investimentos realmente estão produzindo os benefícios propostos. É aí por isso que organizamos este evento hoje. É por isso também que mantemos diálogo constante com instituições e realmente a gente acha imprescindível a parceria que temos com a CVM e com o Laboratório de Inovação Financeira, que juntos construímos as bases para que o setor prospere. Esses esforços com a CVM, aliás, ganham agora a projeção global. O nosso Laboratório de Inovação Financeira Compartilhada, que mantemos com a CVM, acaba de ser nomeado, reconhecido como a primeira organização de América do Sul a ingressar na FC4S, a Rede Internacional de Centros Financeiros para a Sustentabilidade. Além do reconhecimento, a adesão representa a possibilidade de integrar uma rede global que busca desenvolver mecanismos financeiros inovadores, que integram desenvolvimento econômico e socioambiental. Apesar da tendência de crescimento e da relevância, este é um mercado ainda em construção. E nossa função como Banco de Desenvolvimento é promover as condições necessárias para que os investidores, emissores e a sociedade em geral tirem o máximo benefício das finanças sustentáveis. Na prática, o nosso compromisso por ajudar o mercado a se desenvolver pode ser visto, por exemplo, pela Green Bonds Transparency Platform. Essa é uma ferramenta que desenvolvemos com mais de 50 parceiros e que ajuda a lidar justamente com a questão do reporte dos impactos positivos dos títulos temáticos, que é ainda objeto de dúvidas de alguma parte dos emissores, né? Para retomar aqui uma ideia que já expus nos eventos anteriores, que foram parte deste World Investor Week, fomentar este mercado é uma maneira de captar a consciência crescente, inclusive impulsionado pela pandemia, de que o retorno financeiro e o desenvolvimento social, ambiental e econômico precisam, podem e devem caminhar lado a lado. O grupo BID, incluindo o nosso braço de investimento do setor privado, o BID Invest, está a portas abertas para dialogar com outros bancos, governos e empresas para ajudar a incorporar sustentabilidade e impactos positivos em títulos e projetos de infraestrutura. Eu convido aqui a todos vocês que estão nessa reunião hoje a serem parte desse movimento, dessa possibilidade de transformar esse instrumento realmente em uma forma sustentável de financiar a infraestrutura aqui no Brasil. Gosto reconhecer mais uma vez ao Vasco da CVM, agradecê-lo pela parceria tão importante para esse mercado e agradecer a Maria e aos palestrantes que venham a compartilhar seu conhecimento conosco hoje. Muito obrigado. Passo a palavra para nosso parceiro, o Vasco, para fazer as suas palavras introdutórias. Contigo, Vasco.
Muito obrigado, Morgan. Bom dia a todos. Bom dia aos nossos palestrantes, a quem agradeço por estarem aqui também para compartilhar o seu conhecimento nesse evento que tem vários significados. Primeiro, porque encerramos uma semana de centenas de eventos, algumas dezenas de eventos, mais de uma dezena de eventos realizados em parceria com o Lab de Inovação Financeira. Essa iniciativa que teve início há 3 anos atrás, quando o BID e CVM combinaram e planejaram o lançamento de uma plataforma que inicialmente se pensava que poderia chegar a 30 pessoas no máximo e até caber numa sala da CVM, e hoje nós temos 600 representantes de 197 entidades trabalhando em temas de sustentabilidade e de inovação financeira que vão, de fato, e já estão mudando a realidade do país. Um tema estratégico para o mercado de capitais e para todos os mercados, que não poderia andar tão bem se não tivesse tido esse apoio do Banco Interamericano de Desenvolvimento, essa visão estratégica, e esse apoio que posso falar aqui em nome da CVM. A CVM agradece muito, reconhece o valor dessa parceria, o que ela agregou e o que nós aprendemos com o compartilhamento de informações com os técnicos do BID de excelente qualidade, com as linhas de frente, com os avanços. Então, se eu pudesse recomendar alguma coisa, eu recomendaria todo órgão que queira, de Estado, que queira ter uma visão de futuro para a inovação financeira e para a sustentabilidade, pensar numa parceria com o BID, porque ela foi muito transformativa para a CVM nesse específico, nessa área, e está nos beneficiando não apenas o mercado, mas também internamente as equipes, a capacitação. Então, com uma grande satisfação que a gente encerra essa semana de educação, de cultura, de formação de pessoas e, portanto, de instituições também, com esse tema aqui, que é também extremamente relevante para os reguladores de mercados de capitais. Ele é relevante, primeiro, no âmbito internacional. A IOSCO, como acho que é bem conhecido, publicou um relatório esse ano, apontando a importância de ter uma melhor compreensão das taxonomias e third-party frameworks disponíveis, existentes no mundo para questões de sustentabilidade, e estabelecendo uma task force que a CVM integra para, entre outras questões, trabalhar essa temática, avaliar questões relacionadas, possíveis questões relacionadas a greenwashing, como prevenir, como proteger os investidores, como estimular um melhor grau de transparência dessas informações, enfim. E, recentemente, ainda no mês de setembro, o secretário-geral da IOSCO, em um evento internacional, isso foi reportado no Financial Times, falou do esforço que essa task force terá para encontrar pontos comuns entre as diferentes ou as principais metodologias e fortalecer ou encontrar um caminho que facilite a compreensão dessas informações pelos investidores e o trabalho dos reguladores. A posição da CVM nessa temática sempre foi, até aqui, uma posição de deixar que o mercado decida e escolha as taxonomias e metodologias que quiser adotar. Não havia uma intenção regulatória da CVM nesse campo, e sim a regulação no sentido de cobrar que as escolhas sejam consistentes e sejam reportadas de forma adequada, com o nosso papel de supervisão também. Mas é claro que a discussão avançou e, nesse momento, inclusive dentro desse esforço que a IOSCO está fazendo no âmbito internacional, é fundamental refletir também no Brasil, ampliar essa discussão. Então, vejo que nós encerramos a semana um dos temas mais relevantes para a sustentabilidade no país e também com a escolha de instituições que aqui estão, que vão ser fundamentais nesse processo de diálogo. A regulação, ela tem os objetivos de proteção do investidor, de redução de condutas inadequadas, do risco sistêmico, de aumento da eficiência, mas ela deve ser feita, e é feita pela CVM, sem desconsiderar diversos fatores como o custo de observância, o diálogo com os participantes para entender as implicações, e nesse tema em especial, penso que uma ampla discussão com os participantes do mercado a fim de escolher os caminhos que sejam melhores para o desenvolvimento do país. Então, a gente está aqui num dia muito importante, que o país entra também no Financial Center for Sustainability, o que não seria possível sequer se cogitar sem esta parceria com o BID, e eu tenho certeza que esse dia que se encerra é também um marco do que vem para frente. Olhando para trás, volto a dizer, quem poderia imaginar há 3 anos que nós estaríamos nesse nível de discussão aqui? E essa estrada só pode ser construída com essa excelente e fundamental parceria com o Banco Interamericano de Desenvolvimento no país. Nós estamos muito satisfeitos, orgulhosos e agradecidos por todo o esforço. Eu desejo aqui, encerrando as nossas palavras iniciais, um excelente evento a todos.
Muito obrigado, Vasco, e muito obrigado, Morgan, por essa abertura. A gente vai passar daqui a pouco para inglês, porque, como o Morgan apresentou, nós temos um painel fascinante aqui de vários padrões e várias boas práticas de mercado que vamos poder compartilhar com o mercado brasileiro, mas a gente está trazendo aqui alguns atores internacionais, né? Talvez só na abertura, ainda falando um pouco em português e da nossa situação no Brasil, e levantando um pouco os temas que o próprio Morgan e o Vasco já levantaram, o Laboratório de Inovação Financeira, onde a gente está junto com a CVM, com o pessoal da Associação Brasileira de Desenvolvimento, a BDE, e o GIZ dos alemães coordenando, mas que tem mais de 600 especialistas e 160 instituições que estão trabalhando no mercado financeiro de capitais no Brasil, vem olhando com muita atenção o tema de como integrar a sustentabilidade, né, no nosso sistema financeiro, e particularmente nesse mercado novo que o Morgan ressaltou, dos títulos verdes e temáticos, a gente vem vendo uma tendência importante, né, de considerar como tratar melhor, né, a questão da padronização das taxonomias, sem que isso, como o Vasco bem levantou, seja um processo top-down, né? No próprio Lab, saiu muito forte que os atores do mercado acham importante deixar o mercado desenvolver essas práticas. Por outro lado, o Lab, há uns anos atrás já, fez uma análise do mercado, a gente fez uma pesquisa, a pesquisa foi feita com mais de 100 participantes do mercado, né? E foi muito interessante porque a maioria dos investidores, o que levantou foi uma preocupação de um tema que hoje estava na Valor Econômico, né, um artigo da Valor Econômico, que é o greenwashing, né, que é a preocupação sobre o fato de que eles, de repente, têm preocupação de investir nesse mercado sem saber se o ativo que ele está realmente investido é verde ou não, né? E nesse sentido, eu acho que a questão aqui, além de terem várias taxonomias e como os investidores, os emissores no mercado participam, tem essa questão também da transparência e da importância que o mercado possa mostrar que, de fato, ele tem um impacto socioambiental. So turning maybe to English now so that we can have the advantage of having a dialogue. As Morgan already said, in case anybody wants to switch the language, we have a button on the top, on the bottom of the screen with the world signal, and you can there get the English or Portuguese translation. Vocês podem ter tradução para português, no caso precisarem, está aí abaixo na nossa, como se diz, na nossa apresentação aqui. I will start with Nicholas Pfaff. He is from ICMA, as Morgan already presented. Nicholas, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions relating directly to what I was just mentioning before. We have seen in Brazil in particular that the green bond space has developed a lot. It is, let's say, recognized, and it goes without saying nowadays, that all the green bonds that are issued, at least most of them in Latin America as well, are those that should be validated by a second party, and that we should have a review of the quality of those issuances. However, we do have a question about what has been the experience with the post-issuance checking of what is being done in terms of the use of proceeds, but also the impacts of the bonds. The Inter-American Development Bank, us, together with the Climate Bond Initiative last year, we did a survey in Latin America, and actually we saw that only 1% of such issuances were doing validation and reviewing, let's say, what happened with these bonds afterwards. So I would like to ask you, what is your perception a bit from the global market with regards to these, let's say, next step, which is a good step, which is the meaning that our market has been developing, and now we start looking at what has been done with these bonds. What is the latest on this, and what is your perception regarding this?
Well, first, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, and I'm delighted to speak to a Brazilian audience. I think this is the first time, and I think it's a very welcome development. On the question of ex post checking, I think it's absolutely fair to say that the emphasis in the market has been to date on the pre-issuance side. And if you look, firstly, you look at what is the guidance in the Green Bond Principles, which of course are the principles that ICMA hosts. It is first a strong recommendation to have your allocation audited. So the first check is, where did the money go? And this is, relatively straightforward because it can come down to an audit style exercise. Now, where things get more interesting and where there's been a lot of work is this question of impact reporting. And what we have been doing is, first in the principles is to say, we really recommend that you do provide impact reporting, both during and at the end of the green bond. But also we recognize that you need to have guidance on what should be in the impact report and what kind of metrics can you provide. And so we have an ongoing working group which brings together, and this won't surprise many of you listening, the International Development Bank community, where a lot of work has been going on. And so it's not as if we've constituted this group of, of new scientists and new academics. What we're doing is we're bringing together, through our convening power, those institutions who've already got a great track record in looking at this work. And under the chairmanship of the EBRD, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and KfW from Germany, we have, with this working group, been bringing out every year sectoral impact reporting guidance, most recently for biodiversity. So we now have a handbook, which every year gets expanded, where sector by sector, we slowly try to develop best practice for impact reporting. So that's what's happening, I think, in terms of the guidance. Now, if you look at what's happening in the market, I think most issuers do try to do impact reporting. Again, I think allocation reporting is something which is very much market practice. Is it at this stage clear that everybody's doing the impact reporting right? No, I think that's, we don't have perhaps something which is completely satisfactory. But again, I think a lot of work is going on in this space. The last comment I'd make is, if you look at the EU Green Bond Standard, which is the potential standard being developed in the EU, the requirement on this question is very much in the one which is highlighted in the framework, which is recommended, i.e. issuers have to explain how they will do impact reporting. And then the allocation reporting is a requirement, and then the impact reporting needs to be done, but it doesn't necessarily have to be verified. This may be anticipating, further questions from you.
Okay, Nicholas, a lot of further questions from my side, but I will have probably a second round of questions. You were talking about these good practices on impact reporting for green. What is being done on sustainable SDG side? There, in the case of Brazil, actually, we only recently had the first social bond. There is very little experience yet with sustainable.
Yeah.
It's a much smaller market, right? So on the other hand, particularly now with the COVID crisis and the need to do recovery, frankly, we cannot say the recovery is only green. It needs to be also social and inclusive, no? And the question is for you, how do you see this work that you were able to start doing, say, at a global level for green, moving as well to the SDG and sustainable side? There, I think we also, even with regards to the pre-issuance, we still have a lot of questions on what is the actual frameworks. No? So it would be interesting to get your perception of how this is moving. And, I think is an inspiration to think on what
Yeah.
you're saying. And I have a lot of ideas already on our Brazilian laboratory, how we can collaborate.
Okay.
But please go ahead.
Well, first, we'd very much welcome the cooperation, and we have a social bond working group, which is of course gaining, has always been very important, but it's always going to gain more and more in importance because, perhaps as a preliminary comment, social bonds until recently was indeed the junior standard, compared to the green bond principles, and the sustainability bond guidelines, which essentially provide the confirmation that you can mix green and social together.
Mm-hmm.
And there had been more traction, I think, in the last 2 years for these mixed bonds, if you prefer. But by any measure, this year is the year of the social bond. The pandemic has created the need for greater social issuance, and in a way, the market was looking for a solution, and the social bonds, the social bond principles were there. Now, what people may not realize, because there's been less discussion about social bonds, is this doesn't date from yesterday. We launched this 5 years ago, and we didn't, pluck it from nowhere. This was based on a lot of work that had been done by international development banks and also by national promotional banks. There are specialized national institutions, regional institutions that function social, and of course, the World Bank Group, the Inter-American Development Bank, et cetera, all have had a track record in bringing out social themed bonds. And these can be on gender issues, women empowerment bonds, education bonds, et cetera. So there was already a lot of work out there. It just hadn't reached the scale of green bonds. And we've had a social bond working group, which one has been developing the principles, and one, to make the link with what you were saying, your question specifically, is we also provide specific guidance for impact reporting. So there is a separate document which provides this. Now, of course, the difficulty, but also the opportunity with social is it's a much wider topic. One of the problems we faced when we're putting together social bond principles is, everything can be social. So how do you narrow it down to make it something which avoids the pitfalls of being too wide and being dilutive, and at the same time be clear in terms of what's trying to be achieved. And so, without going into details, you have a definition of, for social categories, you have a definition of what is a social project. You have to link your social project to a specific targeted population. It can't just be for anybody. You have to identify who you're trying to help. You have to have metrics, and then you also have to subsequently describe the social outcome which you are aiming for. And so that does provide a conceptual framework and market practices which I think underpin this market. Now, what we will most likely never have in this market is the certainty of hard science thresholds. In green, you can have a scientific or at least a technical definition of what is green. In social, we're never going to have that. It's a bit like the distinction between the hard sciences and the social sciences. In social, there's always going to be more intuition. But I'd like to reassure those that think that social bonds are by definition more fuzzy, if I can put it that way, than green bonds. That's not the case. There's a lot of track record, there's a lot of guidance, and it's important that issuers and investors are aware of it.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. I'll come back to you after I go through another round. I have quite a few areas that I think we can develop further, but I think it's very important what you were mentioning, that we get to know, and maybe one question I will bring later is precisely the question of transparency. How can we promote those impact guidance that are being developed to be better known in the market? No?
Very good.
Going to Stacy. Stacy, with the TCFD, you have been looking a lot more about the governance side as well, no? And the TCFD has been doing a great work in trying to promote financial systems disclosures in terms of their track record, but also understanding not only individually for every investment, what is the responsibility of the financial market as a whole with regards to their exposure, the types of things they are doing. I wanted a bit to ask you precisely from this point of view of more of governance. Now here, before we were talking a bit about the guidance for the impacts, but also part of what investors are looking for today is to understand also what is the track record overall of the corporation or the issuer in terms of what is the governance, no? How do you see the climate-related financial disclosures that you are promoting in TCFD being important and bringing an additional, let's say, layer for the discussion on sustainability?
Great, thank you. First, I'd like to also thank IOSCO and the Inter-American Development Bank and IDB Invest for organizing this discussion and inviting me to participate. I think it's incredibly important. And so maybe I'll just take a quick second and talk a little bit about what the TCFD recommendations are, just so everybody's on the same page. Our recommendations were published back in June 2017, and they're the result of, I think, the first industry-led effort to create guidelines for disclosing climate-related risks and opportunities in mainstream financial filings. And so, while the task force was created by the Financial Stability Board, which is a group of financial regulators from around the world, the primary focus was to help industry participants develop disclosures that could be used by lenders, investors, and insurance underwriters in making financial decisions. And so I think the recommendations are sort of central to a lot of efforts to disclose climate-related information. Clearly, we're not a broader sustainability framework. We focus strictly on climate and financial risk. And so I think what's made our recommendations successful is that our membership is a balance of users, so investors and lenders and insurance companies, as well as preparers. So we have a lot of non-financial companies and financial companies that put forward disclosures so that people can make better decisions. So as Maria noted, one of our overarching recommendations is around governance. And we view that as a critical element of the entirety of our disclosure recommendations. Governance focusing on what is the board doing and what is management doing in the context of climate-related risks, managing those, how they change strategy around it, what kind of data they report. And so we're getting ready to issue another status report, and one of our findings is that while governance is a recommendation, we suggest everybody disclose. It's actually one of the lower recommended disclosures that companies do report on. And we need to dig further into why that's the case. There's actually more disclosure by companies on the climate-related risks that they have and what they're doing, kind of their plans around managing those and how they've changed strategy to address it. So I think that's an area where we definitely need to see more improvement. Now, when it comes to why it's important to pay attention to the governance, this is an area that we've heard from investors. We did a survey as part of our status report this year to understand what users want. And one of the key parts of the information that they look for, in addition to what is the financial impact on a company of climate change, they also want to know how this is being governed and what steps they're taking to manage the risks, and is the board involved in decisions around what the company does on climate risks. And so I think, as we've been seeing within the task force, and I think you can even check the news and find that this is happening more regularly, as more than 120 countries move towards a net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, as they move in that direction, more and more of them will start to mandate or legislate companies disclose climate-related information. Some of those countries are already pushing the task force's recommendations as the framework to use to disclose that information. And we think many more will also move in that direction to ask companies to disclose in line with the recommendations. As I'm sure others will talk about on the panel, when it comes to green bonds, out of the 100 trillion bond market that exists, less than 1% are actually green bonds. And as companies and countries move to meet the Paris Agreement and align with a net zero world, more and more investment is going to be funneled to green bonds and financing that advances movement toward a lower emission global economy. And so as you take all that into account, we think that the task force's recommendations will become increasingly important for companies to adopt and for investors to ask for. And so we think that going forward, it'll be critical that companies and investors think about the task force's recommendations and build on with other things like Nicholas talked about and SASB will talk about in terms of all these things coming together to become more of a foundation of how companies look at risks and how investors assess risk broadly, right? Financial risk related to climate change will become a core element of how companies and investors look at these risks. And so we're encouraged that this is being discussed here today and look forward to the continued discussion.
Stacy, this is a very important point. The fact that we have to look at the impacts, but also the risks. And I think this is the issue. Most of the green bonds at the beginning were looking at, well, I have a green benefit, but did I, for example, also consider that the location of my project or the way I constructed infrastructure considered also the potential negative impacts of the climate in the infrastructure or at the infrastructure in the surroundings, be it as environmental or social impacts. So this integration of also considering green, not only the positive impact, but also not damaging and also the resilience of these investments is very important. And sometimes we tend not to understand that there is this three-dimensional issue, that there could be a negative impact from the investment. Environment can impact our investments and we need to be aware of that. So we need to consider that when we do the investments. And we also, of course, are wanting to promote positive green and social impacts. Question for you is, what examples would you have, or is there an example of, good example of a bond or a green bond initiative that has already been conversating with TCFD recommendations and that we could use as, let's say, something we could flag as something to follow?
So on the green bond side, it's not an area the task force is directly focused on because in theory, we're agnostic to the types of financing that occurs. Exactly. But there are several different investor organizations out there working together that I would suggest people check out in terms of, there's Climate Action 100, which is over 500 investors with, I think it's 47 trillion of assets collectively that they have under management, that they're pushing companies to use the TCFD recommendations and disclose against those. And they're also looking at shareholder proposals, and they do a lot of different work. There's also CERES, CERES, that has case studies on its website. And I would imagine at least one of them has something on green bonds, but they talk about how to use climate-related information disclosed by companies in making decisions. And then there's the International Investor Group on Climate Change, and they have issued guidelines on how to use climate-related information in making decisions. And so I think that would be relevant in looking at green bonds as well as other types of instruments. And so there's definitely a lot of information out there, and we can pull together those resources and share so that you can send to the participants. But I don't have a particular example of a company that's done something or an investor that has looked at it, but there is a wide range of information available.
Thank you very much, Stacey. I'm pretty sure there'll be a lot of questions on that. And indeed, maybe we need to kind of see how we can share this. I will pass to Arturo now, precisely coming on these discussions we had before, no? Good practices on impact, and on the other hand, how do we handle governance and risks, no? You have on the SASB here been already working independent of for bond markets for a while to help, let's say, investments to integrate those concerns sustainability for a while. I wanted to kind of you to give us your perception, Arturo, of what is the relevance of standards or these taxonomies. Sometimes they can help, but how is this being done? What are the lessons learned also of what worked so well and what did not maybe work so simply?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, let me thank the organizers of the event for inviting me and SASB to convey our message here in this platform. And as Stacey started, I just want to give my elevator pitch of SASB so that we can start from the same starting point, and then I'll answer your question. So for those of you that don't know SASB very much, SASB is a nonprofit standard setting organization whose objective is connecting businesses and investors on the financial impacts of sustainability. And we do this by focusing our standards on two main points, industry specificity, and we have 77 industry-specific sustainability disclosure standards, and also focusing those standards in enterprise value creation and financial materiality. Our standards identify the ESG factors that are reasonably likely to affect the financial condition, operating performance, or risk profile of companies within an industry. So I just wanted to give that quick pitch so that, again, we're all starting from the same starting point. So to your specific question, I think all of us in this panel and all of us in the audience agree that financial and non-financial standards and frameworks help create a baseline, a foundational layer of high quality company reported information, which the rest of the capital markets can rely on. And I use the terms framework and standards separately because in the view of SASB, these are two different participants in the sustainability reporting ecosystem. Frameworks are organizations that define how information should be presented. For example, Stacey was talking about the TCFD and how the information should describe a company's leadership, governance, strategy around climate risks and opportunities, right? So that's, in our mind, that's a framework. And then there are standard setting organizations like SASB that take different sustainability topics and describe what, not how, but what information, what specific information should be presented to investors or disclosed to investors so that there can be useful information out there in the market. So it's important to note the subtle difference between frameworks and standards because like with the financial information ecosystem, the sustainability reporting ecosystem is very diverse, and we have frameworks and standards underlying and providing that base for reporting and transparency. And we have all the different players in the capital markets that use that information, right? From reporters to software providers to auditors that verify that information, to data providers that aggregate that information, and analytic platforms that use proprietary information to create their own scores. And all that information, that sustainability information, flows to end users and regulators to determine what companies are performing better under certain sustainability, environmental and social topics. And this, of course, is very important for sustainable investments. And what is also important to understand is that unlike the traditional financial information, sustainability information is more complex because there are many use cases for sustainability information. Financial information in one hand, the only I guess, stakeholders that require or need that information are economic decision makers. But with sustainability information, there's a wide array of stakeholders that want to get information on how a company is doing in terms of environmental and social issues. In one hand, we have of course, investors that may of course want to know more about how companies affecting the environment or society, as well as how society and the environment are affecting the company itself. But also there are other stakeholders that want to know more about this information apart from investors, and that may include civil society, governments, employees, supply chains, et cetera, et cetera. So that is why we at SASB look at sustainability information in a way. You can think of sustainability information and enterprise value creation in a nested way. It's the nested materiality concept that we're trying to convey and push in, where there's definitely information on sustainability that reflects an organization's significant impacts on the economy, environment, and people. Then that's a big circle, if you will. And then within that circle, there's a subset of sustainability topics that are financially material for enterprise value creation. And within that circle of enterprise value creation topics, there's also reporting that already happens in financial accounts. And of course, all of these, this concept of nested materiality comes together because the different actors that want to get their hands on sustainability information, what they want is basically transparency and disclosure, so that they can use that information to compare the performance of a company or a bond or a portfolio with another one and see which one will create more benefits for society or the environment or sustainability in general, as well as protect the economic performance of a given portfolio or a set of actions.
Okay, it's a very good point. So what you are saying basically is that these issuers, when they are actually using these data sets and using your standards, are also should be looking at not only necessarily only the bond issuance, but the overall use of these data for many reasons, no? For management, for how they are perceived in the market, for relationship with buyers and value chains and so on. So that's a very good point. Coming back a bit on the question I had before with the discussion with Nicolas, you said you are dealing with sustainable information. Are you looking both at social and green, and how do you see the different use of those data? And would be interesting to understand, in particular with regards to Latin America and other countries in the world, no? What is the difficulty or the facility you have seen to promote these standards in terms of, as you said, is important also the information that people are able to collect and present? How do you see the practices with regards to that?
Yeah, so I guess there are two questions there. The first one is on social and environmental, so I'll answer that one first. The SASB standards, the uniqueness of the SASB standards is that they are industry specific, right? We do cover social and environmental topics, as well as topics that relate to the manufacturing or provision of manufacturing of products or provision of services, and how social and environmental aspects are embedded in the design of products and services. And the beauty of the SASB standards is that they are industry specific. So depending on the industry, the disclosure topics that are included in the SASB standards will be more biased towards the environmental side or the social side, depending on the industry. So you can think of, I'll give you an example. You can think of the standard of the oil and gas exploration and production industry. That is, of course, a very environmentally biased, if you will, industry that has a lot of that can have a lot of positive or negative impacts on the environment, So if that standard will be more biased towards environmental topics. But if you were to download the standard for, I don't know, biotech and pharmaceutical industry, that's an industry that is focused almost exclusively on social issues, right? Health, promoting health across the world. So this is all to say that the standards do cover a lot of different sustainability issues, from environmental and social to other stuff like governance and corruption, etc. And depending on the industry, since we are focused on the topics that actually focus on enterprise value creation and financial materiality in the long term, the mix of those topics might differ from industry to industry. So I hope that answers your first question. Then the second question on Latin America. One of the things that SASB learned very early on during its creation, we started by focusing first on the US market and the US capital markets, but we quickly realized that the language of sustainability and financial materiality is actually spoken across the world. And it doesn't matter if you're a company in Brazil or a company in the US or a company in Mexico, where I'm speaking right now, or in Europe or whatever, but investors and companies across the world want to know more information about the key aspects of sustainability that may impact enterprise value creation. So in that way, the SASB standards talk to companies and investors across the world. And of course, there are specific challenges, regional challenges and country-specific challenges for each market, depending on the maturity of sustainability disclosure and the robustness of their institutions and regulators, et cetera, et cetera. But I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands that the SASB standards, while they originated in the United States, they are applicable to companies across the world. And we actually have seen examples of companies in Latin America and Brazil reporting on the SASB standards. The SASB standards were developed in their final version in late 2018. And so far we have identified 19 reporters in the region in this first round of reporting. And of those 19 reporters in Latin America and South America, 9 of them, more than almost half, are based in Brazil. So we're seeing companies in Brazil and in the region starting to look at their standards and see value in talking and providing information and transparency on on these key topics that may impact enterprise value creation.
Thank you very much, Arturo. This was a very interesting. Also, lots of other questions. I think we almost, Vasco will agree with me, can organize with each of you a separate webinar with the lab for our participants in the lab to learn more. I would like also now to turn to Marcelo. And also actually following on what we just discussed on the 3 different perspectives, be it from principles, framework, standards. In all cases, we have different ways of looking at sustainability. I think all of them are actually quite complementary, but still there is a question of how can we harmonize these disclosure practices, no? Marcelo, you are working with the PRI, and in Brazil you have been doing a lot of work already with investors. I would like to learn a bit from you, Marcelo. What is your perception of what are the key steps for us to promote more of this harmonization process, particularly from the investor point of view?
Thank you, Maria. Well, this is a $1 billion question, right? But first of all, I'd like to thank the IDB for inviting me for this discussion, and IDB and the other organizations. This topic is very important for the PRI. For you to have an idea, one of the strategic goals that the PRI has in its 10-year blueprint is driving meaningful data throughout markets, which means that the PRI is trying to get more and more involved in this issue to try to contribute with this discussion, of course, being neutral, and of course, it also giving the perspective of the investors mainly. However, the PRI has just joined a collaboration initiative with the the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And one of the objectives of this collaboration is to contribute with the several initiatives that has been raised in this topic. And of course, as I said, given the investor's perspective. But of course, when we talk about harmonization, it's very important to explain that we have, first of all, we have to think what kind of harmonization we are thinking about, right? We're not trying to. I don't think we need a fifth or sixth standard or framework, whatever. And I'm going to change the word standard for framework here. I'm sorry about this lack of knowledge on this topic. But the thing is that what the market needs, and I think it's the PRI position, is using frameworks that converge in their main aspects of the reporting, sustainability reporting aspect of the sustainability reporting issue. So back in 2018, 2 years ago, the PRI published a document called the Investor Agenda for Corporate ESG Reporting. And it was already identified that, of course, harmonization of corporate reporting was one of the biggest challenges, but not only this, but also the fragmentation of the data for investment decisions. And thirdly, the lack of end-to-end reporting that investors and the beneficiaries need on ESG issues. So what are the main meaningful information that the beneficiary needs in terms of ESG? So this report was a starting point so that the PRI got involved in this agenda. But to be more concrete in your answer, I think the most important thing is to start from scratch, and to understand what is the basis, what are the fundamentals that have to be behind this sustainability report. What kind of information we need there? And it sounds very obvious, but when you kind of empty your mind, I think you sometimes you come out with better ideas and avoid the bias that maybe one framework or standard has and the other one maybe has a different bias. So I think this is a first movement that I think it's very important to do. Another step towards this kind of harmonization is kind of working on a stock taking analysis on how the existing standards are doing in terms of are they meeting the investors' needs and the corporate needs. So this is very important, and to see the gaps that these standards have compared to the ideal standard that we are looking for. But basically, what we think when we think about harmonization, we immediately think about comparable sustainability data. However, sometimes being comparable doesn't mean being meaningful. So it's very hard to get this balance between comparability and how meaningful the information is. But the most important thing I think in this kind of harmonized framework or standard is that we have to identify ESG risks and opportunities, which means that ESG factors that likely impact the financial conditions and operating performance, they have to be, and of course with financial materiality, they have to be very clear in this kind of report. And also, it's very important that in this report, in this ESG risk and opportunity, we include forward-looking approach, just like the TCFD has recommended in their framework. Okay, but also not only the ESG risks and opportunities, but also the sustainability performance is something that has to be, when we see a report, a corporate report, we want to understand how the company is going on in terms of sustainability performance, how the entity operations and products impact positively or negatively stakeholders and the environment. So basically, these are the two dimensions that we have to look for in a report. But I have to make a caveat here. We have to admit that there will be no perfect framework or standard. We have to recognize the limitations and boundaries of corporate reporting and identify other data sources that need to support investment in corporate decision making. And it's very easy to understand this because everybody knows that there's no one size fits all solution for a very complex issue like this. And also, I think it's very important to recognize the relevance of the country and global sustainability objectives in contextualizing and tracking performance, which means that, again, a determined KPI doesn't make much sense in determined area or in determined region or in determined sector compared to others. So we always have to make to put the data on the context of that area, of that industry, of that region. So I think it's very important that we think that we will not have like a harmonized, 100% harmonized model. There will be no silver bullet that will solve all these issues. But it's very good that there are a lot of energy and there are a lot of initiatives working towards this attempt of harmonizing the disclosure of sustainability issues. I don't know if I covered. Oh yeah. You asked me about the stakeholders, right? That,
yes. I wanted precisely to follow up. I think there is an interesting point you made here to say you need to look at different perspectives when the investor is looking at an opportunity, right? So coming back to the bond market, green or sustainable, I like your approach to say, well, there is the impacts, there is the governance, and there might be very different perspectives also with regards to what the investors may expect from the corporations. No? So the sustainability comes also with the perception of the issuer as a whole. No, exactly. What do you think? I understand what you mean that harmonization with one silver bullet will not work, and we heard from the previous presentations also that probably you need to have different approaches depending on sectors and depending on the materiality of what you want to do. But that said, what would you see as recommendable or important to engage investors in the Brazilian market in the green and sustainable bond, and what would they be expecting? What could be improved to make sure that even though, as you say, there is no fully harmonized approach, there is at least a converging one that considers and makes transparent these needs for the investors?
Maria, the PRI has a very strong focus on engagement. So, and it's not because the PRI chose engagement as an instrument to really exercise responsible investment, but it's because engagement really works. So when we talk about the green bonds and how and the credibility of the green bond market, and I think transparency is part of this issue. How credible we will have the issuance will have in this, it will be in this market. I think engagement is very important, and investors can engage prior to the issuance and post issuance, and that is very possible. And we can never look for a standardized framework or standard that will give you the answers. You probably will have to do it from scratch, So it's hard to say if I don't know if the audience here wanted to listen that we'll have something that will solve our problems. But as I said before, there's no perfect solution to this. But I think that as soon as we engage investors, as soon as investors engage better with their issuers, and the greenwashing risk is mitigated, I think the market will be more credible and will work better and will grow better in a more organized way. Of course, there are a lot of things going on. The taxonomy, European taxonomy is started in Europe and will start somehow here in Brazil, hopefully soon. But I think all these initiatives help to develop the market and to foster the green finance market in Brazil.
Thank you so much again, Mauricio. Lots of things. The PRI is already collaborating with the lab. Maybe we need to talk more about this education side and work more close together. Glaucia, I wanted to turn to you now and look at a bit more this engagement thing that we were talking with Mauricio with regards to investors. How do we look about engagement with regards to companies, considering that there is an array of standards and indicators? Arturo was mentioning the question of data also. No, what is your experience? You have been working with the Global Reporting Initiative for a while in helping companies to precisely develop such reports. What has been the lessons learned that we could consider here for promoting the green and sustainable bonds markets in Brazil? Glaucia, we can't hear you.
Hi, Maria. I'm sorry. My connection.
Now I can hear you.
Yeah, my connection just. I had a problem with the connection. Sorry. Yeah. First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me, and it's an honor to be here amongst so important and special guests. And I would like to start by talking a little about GRI. It's a very short. It's a GRI was established in 1997, but it was initiated in 1989 due to the Exxon Valdez accident. So by that time, institutional investors started discussing how they could improve their decision-making process. So they found out that they needed more information beyond the financial report they had. So basically, they needed to know how the financial value presented in the report were created. So we are working on that since 1997, and our standards are principles-based. And we also have specific topic disclosures divided in social, economic, and environmental disclosures. Our aim is to promote new mindset in the business that goes beyond the financial mindset. And our methodology aims to help company to manage and be transparent about their own impact, positive and negative. And it's very good to understand their risks and opportunities, and also to see, to have, to foresight what is coming in the future. So it's the external impacts that comes to the company. So, and the voluntary standards can help. I'm saying that not only GRI, but also including SASB, CDP, TCFD, it's the same. But there are conditions to use them. So, and I think that I can mention that they can promote internal and external transparency, and this will lead to robust management. The existing voluntary standards and indicator can assist by providing these disclosures that are not presenting in the financial tools, environmental disclosures, social disclosures, corporate governance information, which is, I think it's fundamental, and for GRI, it's fundamental. So it's not, there is no need to say if it's material or not. It's material for all companies that are intending to issue a sustainability report against GRI standards. The use of these tools can promote a holistic view of the company, risks and opportunities, better management. The sustainability or ESG reporting tools first are excellent tool. I think it's very important to mention for internal transparency, where we have complete and right information for decision-making process. Then not only the report will be robust, but also the management process of the company will be more robust. And this is the first condition for the external transparency and reporting proceeds. It can be for bonds, social bonds, green bonds, or whatever investment, whatever type of investments. They can also promote a systemic view of the company and make that company understand where they are in the or position in the whole discussion of sustainability. So by this I mean we cannot forget the systemic connection with within the ESG issues themselves. For example, you can have a good performance and environmental issues or green aspects inside the company, but it can be reduced to zero if the company is related, for example, to social issues as corruption, tax avoidance, slavery, and so on. At the end of this, the sum up will be zero, right? Related to the use of that, I think we can already mention some example of companies. For example, a good one that are doing ESG reporting and using that for the tracking of the bonds, the proceeds of the bonds is Suzano, which recently issued a sustainability linked bond. So they use that information and ESG disclosure to interact with the investors. And they are using GRI, IRC, SASB, TCFD, and other tools harmonized. So, and it's meaningful for their management process as well. So I think this is the second one. And I think that the condition one that I'm seeing, yeah, and I'm talking and I'm visiting companies daily basis. So I think that the most important condition for the two advantage I mentioned before are is the understanding of the board members of this new issue. So the board members are the last one to arrive in this discussion. So, and they are the missing link for this discussion. So their engagement will be, is important because it will make sure that the strategy they design is related to the operation, related to what they are discussing in sustainability operation inside the company. We made a kind of research last year because I was so intrigued by the companies that have very good and engaged ESG area or sustainability area, and I was intrigued why they were also related to several scandals and problems, accidents. So we made the research and we confirmed that the problem is a cultural barrier and there is an hierarchical problem inside the companies, and a good ESG performance will depend on the board involvement in this discussion. And I think that it's the first question you made for me, right? Should I go directly to the second one?
Yeah, so basically, I think no, that's very good. I mean, what you're saying is basically at the end, it boils down to take advantage of different standards and opportunities, but also it's very important to have good governance and that the investors understand and can see that the companies are really taking this seriously, that this is not just one shot, a bit thinking about standardizing all these practices. No, you have been again for a while now trying to have data sets and so on. I was wondering how the companies can better navigate what kind of I take it that maybe standardization is not the best word. I think Marcelo convinced me, but how can we promote this convergence at the level of also the companies? I think they do see a lot of different opportunities. The case of Suzano you gave is an excellent one of combining that, but from your side, what can we do? I mean, thinking about Brazil again, the lab, what can we do to promote better this convergence if we were to support companies to promote better, let's say, convergence efforts?
Better convergence. I think that it would be, as I mentioned, it could be important. It would be important to have, for example, lab for board members, and because they were
Okay.
the last one to arrive in the discussion. It's true, and they, it's, and I'm talking to companies every day, and they say, oh, it's difficult to achieve or to arrive or to make them understand what we are saying. The common thing is just to the sustainability area to present what they are doing and the risks and opportunities. And after that, they say, so, oh, it's okay, it's beautiful, but let's talk about business now. So I think that it's important to bring them on board of this discussion. And I think it will be a good a good advancement in this. And related to how to make the harmonization. I think that there are, the synergies are there. I think that the misunderstanding of the how, just now I learned that the company approached a professional leader in the sustainability field and said to him, look, I would like to create an ESG area inside the company. But they have a sustainability area already. So I think they need to have this, they need to have more knowledge about that and to understand how it is related to value creation of the company. And the key is knowledge and planning process for the companies, in the companies levels. In terms of the organizations, what I see is that it would be a long way if we need to harmonize or to, I think it's harmonize the structures we have. I think the easier, but it would be laborious, I know, but the easier challenge is related to the consensus amongst the organizations. It will take long, but it will be just like IFRS. It came from a long way until it be settled. I think that we still have something that we didn't spoke about in this panel. It's about the culture of business as usual inside the company. So there is a need to change it. You can have a lot of tools. You have harmonized tools, standardized tools, but if you don't change the mentality, about the economy, it will be a solution, but not a complete solution. So in this part, I would like to paraphrase Kate Raworth when she says that a healthy economy should be designed to thrive and not only to grow. I think this is the change in the mindset we need to have. This is what
Thank
we are
you very
doing.
much, Glaucia.
I'm so
Thank you
sorry.
very much. No, actually it's very good. Actually it's good. We went from a broader level to very concrete also experiences. Coming back to you, Nicholas, we are going to be closing now with a round of questions. From what we heard, I think was fascinating. As I said, I think with each of you, we have a lot of collaboration I think we can do to improve the work we are trying to do with the lab and to support the development of those sustainable financial markets. Clearly, I think there is a need for convergence. There is efforts being done globally and locally regarding different types of potential for frameworks, impacts, but at the same time, we do need to focus this down to sectors, and we have to make it material as well, not only for the issuance of a bond, but obviously that this makes sense also for the companies. And I think what Glaucia ended up on her talk is a good, hint for what we should be indeed improving and promoting, thriving. So I think from what I'm hearing here, in general, there are two things that I would like you all, I will give the word for each one of you to react. If we were to think on how can we help to using these different tools that are available, I think a lot of them can be actually pretty complementary, but we also have an array, and I think what Glaucia was saying, of companies that don't know yet very well how they will navigate on that and how they get their management to understand this. This is from one side. On the other side, we also need to promote transparency and perception from the investors that the markets are really going towards sustainability, that there are impacts on what they're investing, that what the investments they are doing is a very good point made by Glaucia as well, to say it's not good if the company has a beautiful green impact but has corruption issues. So how we can have this information. I think there's two things that come out from it. Transparency. How can we promote more transparency in the market? How can we help that, for example, the local stock markets, the regulators like CVM here, the banks, the actors in the financial and capital markets can promote some kind of transparency and information about these different standards and how to use them. And the other, very important and related to, and I think has a lot to do with the work of PRI, but also SASB and GRI, on the education and the convening. So how can we engage and educate better also investors and issuers to understand the opportunities, take advantage of them, and scale this up? I think there is huge things that came from all of you. I would have loved to actually have much more time for conversating, but wanted to give like a last round of conversation. So maybe starting again, Nicholas, if you can talk 5 minutes about that, Stacy, Arturo, Marcelo, and Glaucia. Nicholas, with you.
Thank you very much, Maria. I'll try to be quite summary on this. I think we should distinguish the situation between what has already happened in Europe or perhaps also China vis-a-vis other markets. Because the question of, starting perhaps from the end of what you were saying, how can we promote this? We're kind of already there, I would argue, particularly in Europe. And this is translating particularly through a very significant regulatory drive. So we've moved from just the market to the legislative space. We've had discussions for the last 3 years now on the EU Action Plan on Sustainable Finance. We now have a renewed sustainable finance strategy. We've got the Green New Deal in Europe. So the whole sort of mainstreaming, education, et cetera, has happened there. I think, of course, when we go wider afield and we come to Latin America and we come to Brazil, obviously we're not quite there yet. But I would say that the trend that we're seeing is a global one. So I'm actually not too concerned about the question of how do we promote this, because it's promoting itself, in some way. And we've seen a news flow. Again, I apologize if I'm being European centric. But a lot of the green bond market, supermarket is still very much there, sort of more than 50% of it. When you see the European Commission coming in and saying that it's going to issue $100 billion of social bonds and announcing that it's going to issue 200 billion or 300 billion equivalent of green bonds, you realize that we've moved into a completely different space now. Now we're far from that in other jurisdictions, and hopefully what is going to happen is that this will reverberate globally, and we will see the similar trend. Now, in terms of ensuring the transparency, I would think that there's both an opportunity and a danger. The opportunity is to provide the information that is required by investors across the spectrum. So not just green, but also social, also ESG, taking into account, for example, governance or gender balance, etc. But where the danger is, and we're seeing this again in Europe, where we've had proposals to ask companies to have 52 different metrics. Well, I mean, you can imagine how this would be received, in your average company when suddenly, they may not have quite finished their ESG education, and they're being asked to formally by their regulator, report on 52 different metrics. So the response, that we're providing is, why don't we focus on 10 and make those really meaningful and make it really clear as to what we're asking, and make sure that this is what the investors want, that this is what the issuers can produce, that they understand, and that the intermediaries in the middle can play their role in terms of educating and also ensuring that all this is gonna happen. I'll stop there.
Excellent point, actually. I think the issue of standardization on the one hand is important to promote transparency indeed for the market, and to monetize also, to be clear that eventually the sustainability has an economic value. But you are totally right as well. We have to be very careful in that this doesn't become a science per se. I think one of the points, and that's where we give a lot of value to the lab here, is how can we make it feasible to companies to start doing that without needing to pay thousands of dollars to consultancy firms and having to do very sophisticated assessments. I think partially maybe comes also from the discussion we had with Artur and Glaucia, that they have to probably develop their own ways to do things. But on the regulator side, very good point. We have to be careful on the balance of that. Stacy, from your side, going to the regulator discussion, and what would you say are things we should try to do with regards to these, promoting more transparency, promoting more, let's say, engagement? I like it a bit on the lines of what Nicholas was saying, making it marketable, maybe not that much just engagement from the point of view of understanding that this is important.
Right. So, I mean, one thing that's happening in Brazil that you probably are all well aware of is that the central bank, and it's in good company with lots of its peer regulators across the world, is looking into requiring financial institutions to disclose climate-related financial information. If that moves forward, those financial institutions will need to, in turn, talk to companies about getting information they need in order to put out disclosures that would address their financial risks. And so I think that is a good place to start in many ways, because it's regulatory driven, but I expect would take a lot of kind of back and forth between investors and companies and the regulators to figure out exactly where to go with it. The other thing that I think is going to drive it, and it sort of picks up, I think, what Nicholas was saying to some degree, I do think that with countries that have signed up for the Paris Agreement, they've committed to move financing flows to areas that are, needed to change in order to move to a, net zero economy, world economy. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is sort of the UN body of experts that really understand this stuff, you know, they've talked about $3.5 trillion needed per year to move the world to newer technologies for energy, changing the infrastructure, all of these things. And that is just massive. And once that starts to take off, I think everybody will be clamoring to understand what information they need to disclose, what information they need to assess. I think obviously that will drive green bonds through the roof. And so I think those things in combination will really push the need for people to understand these issues.
Thanks a lot. And actually, that's a very good point. I think the fact that we have regulators actually moving, I think is a huge, huge impact in the markets. It doesn't need to be a top-down standard, but just the signals, like the case of the central bank and CBM here, is super important. Arturo, I don't know what is Abid you're taking now, so more from the one-to-one kind of work you have been trying to do with the companies.
Sure. So back to this idea of transparency, I think I can summarize that in 3 drivers, right? There's the market-driven transparency, and we have examples of that in Latin America. Just last week, 80 institutional investors and capital market participants in Mexico signed a letter asking companies to report on SASB and TCFD. And these investors and organizations represent 25% of Mexico's GDP. So that's the market-driven example in Latin America. There's, of course, the regulatory-driven push by regulators, like in Brazil, CBM, and in Chile, for example, examples in the region where things are being pushed by regulators. And of course, we as an ecosystem of sustainability reporting information need to do a better job in describing how all of these organizations fit together in a complementary and additive way. And to that effect, I guess some of you know that a couple of weeks ago, several organizations, including, of course, SASB, CDP, CDSB, GRI, and Integrated Reporting, released a publication in which we describe our work plan to simplify how these pieces fit together. And also, in that publication, we also set a joint vision on how using our different standards and frameworks those are the main 3 drivers that are pushing transparency across the world, not only in Europe or Latin America or the US, but you see that in different levels in different markets. But it's important for us as the ecosystem to clearly communicate how all these pieces fit together, and communicate also that we're working together to simplify reporting standards, because to echo what Claudia was saying, it took decades for the IFRS to be developed, right? And sustainability reporting and sustainability transparency is relatively new in the context of vis-a-vis financial reporting. So we're working closely together to create a common message and a common understanding of how all these pieces fit together to improve transparency.
That's great news, Arturo. And then just to let you know, we are really IDB here to support, and I think we could have good conversations on seeing how we could maybe even pilot this kind of convergence pilots of efforts on some of our countries, including Brazil and Mexico. But I think the laboratory here in Brazil also is an excellent space for that. So let's talk about that, because I think these are the concrete things we could start doing, and trying to support these local dialogues and this kind of efforts of the different standards to work together is extremely important. No? on a market, as you all are saying. It will come. I think Stacey is right, and I'm not sure if it's for good reasons, because unfortunately, climate change is going to happen. We will see need for more social engagement because of crises like COVID, but independent of that, I think we need to help the players in the market to be able to navigate on this.
And if I may just add something real quick.
Yes, please, of course.
To Marcelo's point of the comment on one size fits all, we at SASB recognize, again, back to this idea of nested materiality and the different use cases of information, ESG information, that no single organization, either a standard or framework, can satisfy the needs of all the market, right? We need to collaborate. So it is really important that corporations and investors understand that we as standard setters and frameworks of sustainability information are trying to collaborate to satisfy in a building block manner the needs of the different players and the different actors that want and need and crave this type of information.
Thank you very much, Arturo. We are going to be bothering you much more on that. Marcelo, if you wanted to take a bit the floor, and I would be interested if you can focus a bit on Brazil, since you are playing a big role there.
Yeah, and actually, I would like to second what Nicolas said. Here in Brazil, we don't have to promote the agenda, because as you know, if we consider that the number of signatories in Brazil as a proxy of an indicator on how much the sustainability, financial sustainability is growing in Brazil, we are going about like 30% in the number of more than 30% in the number of signatories in Brazil. So this is only an example, and also the growth that we have had in Brazil is a very diversified kind of growth with different assets. Some of them more concentrated in the retail sector, and a very good mix of signatories in Brazil. So this is the right momentum, and I think the PRI also has a very important responsibility on trying to help build capacity of this on these investors. So we've been trying to educate investors on, for example, last month we had a webinar on taxonomy, and last month we also had a roundtable on TCFD. So I think it's very important to grow, but it's important to grow in an organized way. Of course, we have had the issue of greenwashing, and I think, you know, I think Europe has had the same problem and still has the same problem. But I believe that when we start to harmonize our local taxonomy with the European taxonomy, this is going to be a landmark here in Brazil, and hopefully the taxonomy will be absorbed by an auto-regulatory framework, or hopefully in a regulatory framework. So this is something that Vasco can help us implementing, because I do think that regulations is important. We just had the same an example with the banking system. The central bank announced that from into, I think, 2 years' time, financial institutions will have to report using the TCFD framework. So I think this is very, very important, and I think we have to put efforts, you know, most of our efforts to make this happen and happen in a very organized way. And again, just to come back to the harmonization issue, I think it's very important, of course, as Arturo mentioned, to put on the same table the standard setters, the corporate associations such as the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, to discuss. And of course, the initiatives that represent regulatory and supervisory agencies like IOSCO and the PRI representing the investor. So it has to be a collective movement. Otherwise, I don't think we'll have we'll succeed in this initiative. But I'm very positive that doing this collectively and without bias, I think we'll get there.
Thank you so much. Glaucia, some last words from your side as well?
I think that well, just to complete what Marcelo was saying, compliment, the harmonization discussion is already happening, and Arturo also mentioned that. So this is the good news. I think that it's important for us to think about reliability of the information. So it's important for us to discuss assurance or audit process.
Yes.
So, this is because today, when you hire somebody to make your ESG report assurance, it's a limited assurance, which is almost nothing, and it's very expensive. You know, the result is almost zero, but it is expensive. And I think that a discussion about assurance, because for me in the future, I see a financial audit process already asking ESG information, the connection between that value created with the ESG values that the company worked on. And I think that in terms of how to spread that, I would like to mention a good example is the electricity facility sector in Brazil. They regulated about disclosure since 2001, first with the IBASE, then after with the GRI. And then if we could see a result of that, if we take the sustainability index from B3, there are a lot of electricity facility companies in there. So it's maybe an example of how regulation could push this discussion.
Thank you so much. It was a very rich conversation. As I said, I think with each of you, I think we could have many hours actually of conversation. And really from the IDB CVM side, we want to keep here the commitment that we want to continue collaborating with you. Also on the laboratory we are promoting in Brazil with the financial markets. The points you ended up with, Glaucia, are important, as well as, you know, promoting to the markets how to use these standards and making it navigable, possible for the companies to navigate and use. As important as that is, you are totally right. We also need to have assurance of the quality of those actions. And I think we're still a bit, I think, on both sides away from that. I agree, and I think we have now more and more knowledge of the importance of the sustainability, but it's still a lot of confusion from companies, from investors on how to move on that. I think these efforts that all of you are doing now to try to harmonize, organize together is important. The messaging from the regulators is extremely important as well, but we need to find ways to probably support still the markets to understand better what the options are, how they can navigate and use different standards adequate to their sectors and situations as well. I think come also from a very interesting conversation at the beginning already with Nicholas on the need for considering social in the scheme. So green, social is not two different things. We should probably consider more and more how we manage this sustainable agenda in a joint way. But also this issue of the reliability, the way to verify. From IDB side also, as Morgan said at the very beginning, we have an initiative regionally in Latin America, the Green Bond Transparency Platform. The platform today is focusing on green because the bonds, thematic bonds market at the beginning were mainly on green, but we do see increasingly the need also to start looking at the sustainable aspect. But even on the green, I think the lessons learned we are seeing from there and I think I learned a lot today as well with you, is this need to consider beyond just the framework of impact, what all the investors and issuers are looking for in terms of positioning themselves in this sustainable arena, be it from the governance side, be it from the material, let's say, impact, how they are changing their behavior over time, how they link the green and social aspects to their own business, but also how we assure that when we say we're going in the right direction, and I like it the words of Glauce, we are thriving. No? So I want to close here thanking so much each of you for your time. We know some of you are talking from other countries. We know that's not always easy to make time for us to be here. As Morgan said at the very beginning of this session, we will have the information in a link here for everybody to see it. The IDB for sure is going to be promoting this, but we'll also be promoting this throughout the lab and CVM, and IOSCO. So for us, it's also a pleasure to be closing with that. The work we did during this World Investor Week, I think could not have been nicer than this panel for us to be closing our series of events. And without no more issues, I want to thank you and say goodbye and see you soon. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.